we want to present our idea of what English composition classes ought to be about. Let's start out with something we think they ought not to be about. That is the categorization of sentences into 4 types for the purposes of promoting varied sentence structure or syntactical maturity. That is, one of the pervasive ideas we see is that students should be encouraged to write sentences of each of these 4 types: simple, complex, compound, and compound complex. And that doing so and mixing them up and alternating between them will give their writing an air of sophistication and maturity, and it will make their writing more readable. None of this is true. We can see why if we just look at what the categories mean. A simple sentence, that's a sentence that has one independent clause and no subordinate clause. And so you get, I see ice cream as an example of a simple sentence. A complex sentence, the name is rather misleading. There's nothing particularly complex about it. A complex sentence contains a dependent clause. So I see ice cream, that has sprinkles on it. That has sprinkles on it is the dependent clause. A compound sentence has 2 or more independent clauses in it. So I see ice cream and I want some now. That's a compound sentence. And the Cadillac of this categorization system, the most complex, the one at the pinnacle is the compound complex. That is, it has 2 or more independent clauses in it, and it has a dependent clause in it. And here's an example of that. I see ice cream that has sprinkles on it, and I want some now. Well, there's nothing particularly complex about it. There's nothing sophisticated about it. All 4 of these kinds of sentences are part of normal everyday speech. Students already know how to use them. It actually doesn't have much of anything to do with effective writing. We put things a little differently. We say that what we're after is normal prose. That is, we want students to produce normal prose, and normal prose is characterized by some structures that are really pretty specific to writing. That is, they are things that are not part of everyday speech, at least not very frequently part of everyday speech. One of the things is breaking the main clause. Normally, once you're finished with any introductory material and you start your main clause, that is the meat and potatoes of the sentence, you don't stop until you get to the end. And student writing is characterized by that aspect of spoken English. That is, once they start with the main clause, they generally never stop. They don't know how to get out of it. They don't know how to break it or interrupt it. But interrupting the main clause is a key aspect of normal prose. So as soon as you do that, you immediately elevate the sound of the sentence, even if the break that you're introducing into the sentence is very, very simple. So for example, I want ice cream. My sister, however, does not. Just the breaking of the main clause with that, however, elevates the prose. All men, Jefferson wrote, are created equal. Notice here that something that most students would be able to handle easily, that is putting a tag or a signaling phrase in the sentence, saying who is responsible for these words. Putting just that little tag in the middle of the clause rather than before it, as most students would, again, elevates the prose. Instead of writing Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal, if you write all men, Jefferson wrote, are created equal, you have produced a writerly sentence, one that is characteristic of normal prose. Candy, on the other hand, is dandy. So again, this is a very simple structure that's been introduced, but it elevates the prose. 2 other more specific things that we focus on are participial phrases set off from the main clause and non-restrictive appositives. First, let's look at the participial phrases. My friend, forgetting his manners, refused to answer. Again, this is something you would almost never say. You would never put it that way. You would probably say, my friend forgot his manners and didn't answer. But by turning that clause into a participial phrase, and on top of that, breaking the main clause with it, you have produced a writerly sentence. Here, the main clause is not broken, but you still have a participial phrase that is set off in the main clause, and that too makes it sound elevated. Arriving late, our host apologized. And by the way, the point is not just to sound fancy. This actually makes for easier reading and allows you to make your writing more dense. You don't have to have a whole bunch of choppy little independent clauses. You can turn these clauses into phrases instead. So the participial phrase set off in the main clause, and the non-restrictive appositive that is likewise set off with commas. So again, this is totally, the content of these is very simple, but they are writerly. They sound as if, well, they are written. They do not sound like speech. They sound like normal prose. My favorite drink, pink lemonade, is on sale. A fan of box turtles, Gabor regularly tramps the woods where they lurk. So a fan of box turtles, that's our appositive. It doesn't break the main clause, but it still actually lends a great air of sophistication and density to that sentence. Pink lemonade does break the main clause. Here's another one that breaks the main clause. Potterville, a town to the west, is enjoying boom times. Here is an example of normal prose taken from a newspaper, and this is what normal prose looks like. I have highlighted the participial phrases that are separated by commas out from the main clause, so that's that one right there. In Sunday's first round, they deserted him, voting instead for the party's own candidate, Marine Le Pen, and that's an appositive. She got 18%, a record for her party, that's another appositive. Her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, that's another appositive. Notice at the very bottom here, which way the angry voters of France turn, from both the far left and the far right, will decide the election. That break of the main clause there with the prepositional phrase, that's also something we would count as a characteristic of normal prose. Here's another example. Here the ratio is a little different. We have, in the previous one, we had more appositives than participial phrases. Here it's more equal. But the point is that this is what normal prose looks like. And if you put students' writing up on the board and treated it the same way, you would highlight nothing, because generally there would be no interruptions of the main clause. The main clauses would not be broken. There would be no participial phrases set off by commas. There would be no non-restrictive appositives set off by commas. So this is you can actually simply show them without resorting to vague complaints about lack of flow or choppiness. You can show them very simply that they are not writing what we call normal prose. So to sum up, the primary goal in our view of English composition classes should be to get students in the position so they can write normal prose. And normal prose is characterized by the occasional use of participial phrases and non-restrictive appositives set off by commas and by broken main clauses. That's normal prose. That's what should be the goal of English composition courses.